Alright. Hey guys, so this is my Connect 4 project, and here we go. I'm going to start off with the requirements. So, requirement number 1, data types. I used all 4 of those, and I have some screenshots here. I'll run through the code at the end to basically go over those again and explain the code, every part of it. So, data types, I use ints and doubles. Well, I use ints for smaller data types, and I use doubles for larger ones. And you can kind of see I kind of OCD organize them here. And so I use the bools and the char up here. I use most of the chars for char arrays, which I'll get into about the animation aspect. And the bools is, as you can see here, like game finish and first turn, which it maintains a lot of loops in the code. And then requirement number 2, the relational operators. I use a lot of them in the code, mostly for loops and stuff. And sorry, this picture's kind of stretched, but basically you can kind of see here how I use less than, greater than, and all of that stuff, which is, yeah, and not equal to. I use some equal checks if equal to. I just didn't put in this screenshot here. But so yeah, I checked here for not equal to. This is a function to find the player's name, like player1.length, because the player's name can't be above 3 characters or under 3 characters. So that's why I use the not equal to. And here I just use less than for a standard for loop to print out the game board. It prints out that a 2D string array. So requirement number 3, that's the logical operators, and you have to use at least 2. And I use these doubles, whatever those are called, and not equal to, like here, not equal to. So I use this one, game finish, because this will continue until the game is done when a player wins, and then the game will exit. Kind of makes sense. And then here I check if the spot either has the first player's chip there or second player's chip there. That's player 1, player 2 chip. So, and it checks that so that it will know, the game will know whether to put the chip in that spot or above it. Because, I mean, if you don't check for that, then you can just really mess up the game and replace player's chips, which isn't exactly fair. So here's requirement number 4, uniary. I use the double plus and double minus sign, mostly in for loops again, like a standard for loop with the plus plus. And I use the minus minus for the 1-7 because, as you know how arrays work, if you have a value like 1, then that will be like 1 up the array, because it actually starts at, like, it starts at spot 0 and then goes 1, 2. So that's why I did the minus here, so that if the user enters, like, say 1, then it'll actually go in like the 2 column. And then requirement number 5, and sorry for the bad audio quality, I don't know how good the audio is. But requirement number 5, if else statements, use at least 1 or more. I didn't use switch statements. I mean, I'm just not a big fan of them. I think if else is, well, I mean, switch are helpful in some cases, but yeah. So here are some if statements. I use a lot more, but so here's standard if statements if the game is false, if the game is true. And I also have most of the code under this big if statement that checks whatever mode the player does. Like here, like at the beginning, it asks what mode you want. There's 1, 2, 3, or 4, and so this, if it's 2, then it'll print that. So requirement number 6, loops. I use many loops. Most of them to display the game board, and a lot of them maintain big parts of the code that it can go through it multiple times until it gets it right. Like the game finish, like that loop goes continuously until the game is actually over. Like I have a while loop here and a for loop in here. This is actually for the start of it. That's why there's if started here, and this actually prints out a char array. Requirement number 7 is functions. So you have to use at least 5 functions, and 1 must contain 2 parameters, and 1 is int main. So really 4 other functions on top of that. And I think the screenshot here. Is there a screenshot? There should be a screenshot. Oh, okay. So Yeah, here's some of the functions. There's tot points, which is total points, basically. So this is the function that determines the amount of points the user gets, and this is after. There's another function here, if it checks for these basically if the user won horizontally or vertically or stuff like that, and then it sets game finish equals true, and then if it is true, which is what I have the if statement for, before it calls this function. Player name, which you kind of saw before, that has the user enter a player name and checks if it's valid or not. And then the void game board here, and this prints out the game board. So there's the string array and the constants. So yeah, and for the passing, the total points, it passes mode 1 or mode 2 win. I have it both equal to win. I just call it differently because I don't actually need to save the value. It just prints it out. And the constants for the game board. The player name is either player 1 or player 2. And if 1, it has pointers for avail space, which the available space is the lowest spot that the chip can go on the game board. So if there's already a chip in that exact place, then avail space gets bumped up 1, and it keeps getting bumped up until it can place a chip there. And if it can't, if the column's all taken up, then you have to pick another slot. And then the pointer for 1 through 7, which is basically the other way around. And yeah, and then there's int main, obviously, that I didn't put in there. So, requirement number 8, passing. Oh yeah, and those are the parameters. Sorry about that. The parameters, which is kind of what I used before. Oh yeah, and total points use turns, which is a variable that gets added to 1 every time turn progresses. So basically, if you win in, say, 5 turns, you get more points than somebody who wins in 10 turns. It all depends on how quickly you win. And there's game board that uses the constants, player name that uses either player 1 or player 2, and the Boolean correct name, that this is the loop that basically repeats itself until the Boolean is true. And yeah. So then, requirement number 8, passing. So you have to include parameters, at least 1 passed by value and 1 passed by ref. So total points is a by val example. I mean, I use others, but that's just an example. Because for total points, as I said before, you don't need to save it, so that's why I didn't save any of these values. And player name, I need by ref for, because you need to save the player's value here so that you can print it out later, so it can say whatever player 1's name is, it's your turn now, or player 2, or whatever. And so, requirement number 9, arrays. So, basically my entire code is one giant array. Well, that's the foundation of it. So you have to declare, initialize, iterate, and modify. Oops. So yeah, here's my big string array. And here's when I'm calling it down there. Oh, and here when I'm modifying it. Basically I check available space. And if the available space is there, then I have it equal to the player's chip. And again, if it's player 2, then that'll be an X, not an O. And then arrays, it's basically array or vector must be traversed through an access, which kind of goes hand in hand with the other one. So yeah, I modify it here, and I access it through like the game board function and through calling it here. So comments, I use a lot of comments in my code. Well, not a lot, but I do use some comments mostly through loops, in case you don't know like a certain part of it. And so I use a lot of codes, mostly in places where reader may not know what's going on. And even for like a simple line of code like that, just so I'm aware of what's happening. I mean, it's helpful for me too, because when it's all just one giant chunk of code, sometimes it's hard to keep track of. Animation. So, and again, I'm going through this code soon. So, I made my kind of intro GUI and GUI, however you want to say that. And so yeah, it basically it says it's loading the game, and it changes colors, and it also has the char array, which you can't see really well here because screenshot, but yeah, it basically types it out there. And I also use things like system CLS, which clears the screen, and sleep, which basically pauses the system for a while, which is how I was able to print out like loading assets and then done and have it wait there and not print it all out like in one blur. Requirement number 13, variable names. I used camel case, which in case you didn't know, is if the variable is two words, then like this, like start mode, like you'd have the first, like normal uncapitalized, and then the first letter of the second word would be capitalized. And then if you have a number there, like 17, you just leave it like that. Or start mode 2, you just put a 2 at the end. That's basically what I did for all these variables. And I did that for the functions too. They had double array, mode 2, win, top score. So yeah, requirement number 14, documentation for the functions. So I have the precondition, parameters, return, and the post. Precondition is what happens before the function begins. Parameters is what's passed through it. Return, what it returns, and post, like what values change after the fact. Like for the if 1, then it'll return the game finish if the game is over. So I was actually able to fit all this documentation here. That's surprising. So I have it up here. Function does when is equal to a certain amount, which again is divided by the turns depending on how many turns the user took. So lowest amount, they get the higher points. Parameters, what's passed, the player's name's printed out. And also for the game finish has to be true in order for this to happen, because you don't get the points if you haven't won yet. And then post, you alter the win value. So player name, it passes through player 1 and letters 3, which is a boolean that checks if the player name is correct, or correct amount of characters. Then returns to player's name and changes the boolean to true. Game board, it passes through const rows, const calls, and the player, obviously the player still has to be in the game. It returns the 2D string array, and nothing really happens after that. It doesn't modify it in this function, it just prints it out so that after somebody plays the chip, the user knows where they placed it. And they can see it on the board. Free 2D string array, 17, and the parameters, the player has to have 4 in a row vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. And it returns either if game finish is true or false, and if it's true, obviously, then they have connect 4. Int main, it has a lot of that. Parameters, 2D string array, and it returns the user's chip whenever they make a selection, or it will print out if you can't put it there, like I said before, like if all of the spots are taken up, then you have to place it in a different column. So last is pointers, and so we have to declare, initialize, dereference at least one pointer. I use 2 in this case for the avail space and 17 respectively, because what I did here was I have the available space and the 17, and I put pointers there so that I can pass them through the if 1. And so yeah, there's a screenshot of that. So I'm going to be running through the code now and explaining some intricate parts of it. And yeah. So here's the start of it. I'll run through if main first, and then I'll come back to the functions. So there's the documentation I was talking about. Int main, so I have srand here, mostly for the computer mode, because for the computer mode, you don't want the computer to put the exact same chip there, because then it'll be super easy to win. And then the game actually won't run, because then he'll run out of spaces eventually to put in it. So there's the char arrays, and I did it like this to, actually I'll show you right now the animation part of it. if this will load, which I hope it will. Please. Okay. Yeah, loading assets, and if you can tell, this is scrolling up because it's using the CLS. And then there, that's the char array that printed out, and it also prints out that. So, yeah, these are the char arrays. These are the booleans. These are the constants. These are the doubles, which again are for the bigger integers. Actually, this doesn't have to be a double. I don't know why I put that as a double. So, and then those are these are the ints, and these are the pointers, and then this is the string array. String player 1, player 2, and the computer. Since the computer doesn't need to enter their player name, it's just the computer. So if the computer wins, then it just says computer has won. So this is part of the animation aspect. This is the sleep that pauses it, and then says loading assets, and it changes the color every time it says that. Adds 1 dot to make it look like it's actually loading and not just stuck on that text for a while. And then I use CLS, and then I use the for loop to print out the start all char array, which says welcome to Connect 4. And how I typed it out all like that was I put a wait first, only for 50 seconds. These appear for 1,000. And I don't know why, but the seconds doesn't actually work like a second. Like you think seconds times 1 would be 1 second. It's actually more like a millisecond. So 50 seconds is actually really quick. And so while the counter is less than the amount of spaces here. And so basically what it does is it goes through each of these, so it prints out 1 letter at a time, with a minor pause in between. But you don't really notice that pause. It looks sort of natural, which I kind of like about it. It looks natural, like it's actually typing out. Like that one animation in PowerPoint where it types out. Then there's a longer pause, and then it says, this is the other char variable, char start, where you press 1, 2, 3, 4 for what you want. And then this is the main loop. Again, it's all controlled by basically one big while statement. So then this is for mode 1. This is another char array. This is for the mode 1 right here, which says you will now face an NPC. And then there's a sleep again. It calls this player name function right here, which I use a do while for it so that I can check afterwards if it is false or not. So it prints out the player, and I pass an int num here, which I just called it here for 1. It makes it easier so that, because I use this player 1, I shouldn't be called player. It should just be called player, not player 1, because I use it for both player 1 and player 2. I just use the num here to print out if it's player 1 or player 2. So then I call the length of it. If it's not 3, then I do that. And then after that, it prints the game board, which is the game board function up there, but I do it this first if first turn is true, so it prints it out at the very beginning. But then otherwise it will just call the game board function. And then it prints out this line. It doesn't really have any function other than to make it look like a natural Connect 4 game board. So player 1's turn, if not game finish, it does this. It CNs the user's input, basically. And available space is always equal to 5 because that's the lowest space it'll be. So if it just starts out, then it'll go like right here. But say there's an O right there. Then it'll go 1 space above there and all of that. So then you'll face another player, enter player 1's name, ABC. Well, ABC. BCA. So yeah, and then it says your game will now begin, and then it prints out player 1's name. And I'm just showing you all this. This is basically all of this right here is basically the same code for each player's turn, except the computer's turn is a bit different. So anyways, so I have available space equal to 5, and basically this is just a standard while loop that checks for if the input is correct, because obviously you can't have the value less than 0 or then it'll be off there, or if it's greater than 7 it'll be off there. So yeah, if it's less than that or greater than that, then it keeps on asking this. If I just use if there, then it'll only ask it once and you can get away with it. So, and there's another while loop. It checks if that spot right there is already available, and if it is, it keeps subtracting from available space, which it's kind of backwards to me, but basically when it's subtracted, it moves up every time. So that's what that while loop is for. And if it's less than 0, then that means that you've gone the maximum and there are no more slots available and you can't drop your chip there. And then it sees in that again and then has available space equal to 5 and repeats that again. Actually, something I forgot to do was to make it if there's no available spots left over. Like if the entire game board is locked up. So, and again, this is different for the other player. This is just an X, not an O, because you wouldn't want to place your chip there and then have it be the opponent's. You'll just give them a win. So, I put this outside the loop because if you're outside of this loop, then you've basically gone all you can and the space is true. Because if the space isn't available, then it'll keep going through this loop. So it's pretty useless to put that in there, so it's easier to put out there. And then here I call the if1. I do that every turn because technically I don't need to for the first round because you can't win the first round because you've only placed 1 and you can't connect 4, but I mean it's easier. I don't want to make an if statement if turns is greater than 4 because that'll just be more work. And it clears the screen every time you place a chip there, which I'll show you in a second. And then, oh yeah, this calls the total points, which is up here. Oh, I forgot to show you the if one. So this is the if one. It's basically very large if statements here with the pointers. This is vertical, and the 1-7 point is added because no, it's horizontal. My bad. Because 1-7 is, but as you can tell by the name, very descriptive name, it's 1 through 7, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the columns? Yeah, columns. Because if it's horizontal, then it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. But you have to check the other way, because, say, I put 1 here, and then 1 here, and then 1 here, then 1 here. It'll keep on adding over here, and they won't give you the connect 4. So I have to do it both ways. 1-7 point plus 1 or minus 1. So I have to check both of those. So just to show you the CLS, I used to have it where it just printed out every single time, so you had to like scroll all the way up to see the first one you did, but now it's all nice and smooth because it uses CLS. Huh? That was weird. So, so if one, oh, and the total points, that calls if the game finish here is true. I think I should have set available space to 1. I think that's why it crashed. Total points, it gets the win, which is either win mode 1 or win mode 2. And it prints out the player and how many points they got. Where was I? I was way all the way down here. And if it's not, then it'll say it's the next player's turn, which is the computer in this case. And then it prints out the game board after that, because if you do that after, well, the way I do it before is because if you do it before, then this is already equal to it, and it'll print out the game board after the user has put theirs in. And if you don't do it that way, then you won't know where they went. So this is the computer's turn. Again, it's a little different from the player's turn because you have to do it randomized, because the computer doesn't, you don't see in for the computer just chooses it itself. And if the computer messes up, it doesn't see out that the computer can't drop their chip there, it just changes it without you knowing it. So it looks more professional. And then has the X there, uses if1, CLS, same thing. And then these are the functions I put at the end of this so that I know this is the end of the while loop, the big while loop up there, which is basically for the mode 1 while loop. And this is the first if statement. And then this is the second one. If it's 2, then it's mode player 1 versus player 2. And then I have a sleep, and this time you have to call two player name functions, which is the player 1 and the player 2. And again, I use that for by ref, as you can see here, I have the ampersand sign, because you want to save that data. And I use the same function for both player names because I felt it kind of unnecessary to use 2 when both of them do basically the exact same thing. And then I have CLS, game will now begin while not game finish. Double R, first turn. There. And then this is player 1's turn, because all this happens before it says player 1, because player 1 always goes first. It's kind of customary. Technically I could have randomized it, but it didn't really matter that much. It doesn't really matter who goes first. And it has the same while loop while it's less than 0 or greater than 7. Double R. Can't drop your chip there. And then, same thing, has it equal to that if it terminates this loop. And if it terminates it, then, well, if it terminates it, then that means that there is an available space. And then this is player 2's turn, which is exactly the same. Except I have an exit statement here, if the game finish is true. Because if it is, then it'll do the top points, which top points up there. It declares who won and how many points they got, so then it just exits the game. And then it has the X there, and the game board. Star equals 3. This is the leaderboard that I was attempting to make, but I couldn't have the player value saved, so I never actually finished it. And then start equals 4, that's just if you want to exit the game. Just exit 0. And if they didn't select 1, 2, 3, or 4, then it will force you to do it again until you get it right. And yeah, that's my code. Only 568 lines. I've seen some that are a lot longer. So, if I can start the PowerPoint up again. How and why I made this code. So, I made this code because, well, I was one of the first to do Connect 4. Well, I was the first person to do Connect 4 because Mr. Mayo listed it under recommendations in that one Word document, and I thought it would be fun. I thought I could put my own twist on it. I thought I could make it kind of creative. And, I mean, I knew beforehand that the whole game was basically going to be a giant array, which, well, it was kind of challenging because I've never done a 2D string array. I mean, I've done 2D arrays, I've done string arrays, I haven't done a big 2D string array, though, which was kind of complicated, but not so much. I mean, I didn't have too much difficulty that, like, yeah. So, debugging, there were a few bugs in the game, kind of what you saw there. I think it was just because I changed the available space, but, basically, if you put in a value greater than 5, it would crash the game, and, well, I don't think it does that every now and then, but, for the most part, though, the if1 still works. And, wait, was that all there? Yeah. And, conclusion, overall, the game, I mean, I went into it thinking it would be pretty easy. It wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. It was a little more difficult. Mostly because of the 2D string array and the bugs I had. In fact, if I hadn't been, like, working on it as hard as I was, I probably wouldn't have been able to finish it. And, but I did work hard on it. And, I did use the functions, I did fill out all the requirements. That was my main priority. In fact, I was filling out like 4 or 5 a week just to make sure I was ahead of the game. And yeah, I did it because I thought I could put my own twist on it, because I thought that if I had done something else, I don't know if I would have been able to actually go through with it and make it kind of creative. Any questions? Sorry, that's my cat. So, yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know. And then I know when I upload my podcast, people are going to claim it, so yes, if you have any questions, let me know. You don't have telekinesis yet, sorry, so you do have to ask. And that is the last slide. Yay! So, I don't know how long that was exactly. But, yeah, that's basically my code. I'll actually try to run through a game before I sign off. Yeah, loading assets. Welcome to Connect 4. So yeah, leaderboard doesn't work. Before I just exit it. I like the CLS. It makes it look nice. And in case you didn't know, it makes you make it 3 letters. Yep. So the one still works. The winning statement, I mean. So, I think that was 30 minutes. So, I'm going to sign off and stop stalling. Thank you for watching. And again, if you have any questions, then just let me know. Just, post the comments. Yeah. I think I just clicked that to stop. And thank you, Mr. Mayo, for the free recording software. I'm new to podcasts, so sorry if this was, low quality. Just a new experience. Not bad. I like it. So, yeah. Use community clips for this. Alright.